What I loved about it is while we were sitting here, I could hear them all sledging each other about the quality of the shot making. Traditionally, this event's held a little bit earlier in the year, and it's a chance to reflect on the summer that's just been for a number of different reasons. We meet later in the year, but rather than looking immediately to the summer ahead, of course, we're going to feast on a middle year, a Northern Hemisphere summer of cricket that was quite amazing. But I want to start, first of all, by going way, way back to you guys in your youth, because while we think of you as the Chappell Brothers and just, you know, this unified group of three, there's actually quite a decent age difference between the three of you. We're talking like 5 years each. So were you ever really three young brothers all playing cricket in the backyard at the same time, or was there would have been quite a distinct age gap, I'd imagine?
Well, firstly, I'd like to thank the prick who put number 11 on the microphone because that's what I made him a first test. No, I don't. Well, I mean, the three of us might have messed around a bit in the backyard, but the test matches, obviously, Greg and myself originally. And bear in mind, someone said to me earlier, who was the strongest? I said, well, I was, because I had nearly 5 years on Greg and I've got 9 years on Trevor. So at one point I was the strongest, but it didn't last long. But yeah, the backyard matches were highly competitive. I didn't realise that Greg was pissed off about having to be England because I was always Australia. But it's interesting, two things. I remember playing baseball for Glenelg and I was catching and Greg was playing third. I was also coach and I just brought him up into the team. And firstly, Johnny Papandrea, who played for Glenelg Baseball Club, said to me, Greg got 3 hits in his first game against East Torrens and we were having a drink afterwards and Pappy said, I want to apologise because I thought you brought your brother up just because he's your brother. And I said, Pappy, you don't know me very well. If you think I'm going to bring him up just because he's my brother, that's horseshit. I brought him up because he can play. But then Greg playing third base and we played Woodville. And Terry Warren, their first baseman, slid into third. And up to that point, I thought of Greg purely as opposition because playing in the backyard. Terry Warren came in with his sprigs up and he cleated Greg in the leg and blood. And boom, the glove went down and I'm off to third base. And luckily we had a smart pitcher in Donnie Rice and Donnie got across and stopped me. And I think that was the first time I sort of realised that, hey, this is my brother and you don't bloody cleat my brother.
That must have been a nice change for you, Greg, because in those backyard test matches, he was equally hard trying to knock your head off, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, as he said, I mean, with the age gap, I mean, he's been my hero from as long as I can remember. I followed him around as a kid. I wanted to do everything that he did. Trouble is with the 5-year age gap, you know, he was, 12 years of age and playing with his friends. I followed him around like the puppy dog, the family puppy dog. Trouble is he treated me like the family puppy dog. He kicked me in the guts and sent me home.
I didn't tell you to piss off.
But so, anyway, he must have run out of mates when I was about 9 because I got invited to play in the test matches in the backyard.
And these were serious test matches, weren't they?
Our father, Martin, insisted that we always played the game seriously. We played with a hard ball, so to find out what the hard ball was like. But he didn't give us any pads and gloves to play with, so I found out what the hard ball felt like. But Martin's madness, the message was that you've got a bat in your hand. If you use it properly, you don't need pads and gloves. But little did he realise that after we'd messed up the backyard, Martin got some black soil in and built a cricket pitch for us in the backyard. But it had a bit of a ridge at the end of it. It was only about 10 yards long. So if in the test matches, things weren't going as well for Ian as he thought they should go, he was very good at hitting the ridge. And I remember one day he hit me on the fingers. And, in the 50s, it wasn't a good look for boys to be crying. And there I was, on my hands and knees, blinking back the tears, trying to stop the pain in the fingers. And all of a sudden, there was a shadow over me. And I thought, at last, a bit of sympathy for my older brother. And all I got when I looked up through the tears was, I wouldn't worry about your bloody fingers if I were you, it'll be your head next. So it was pretty serious in the backyard. So luckily Ian moved on and I became Australia, and I passed on all the good things I'd learned from Ian to Trevor, but that nearly cost me my life, but we can go into that later.
Because Trevor, let's go into that right now. From what I understand, Greg was Australia, and he was also the groundsman in charge of preparing the pitch, and he was using that sort of extra years of knowledge, wasn't he?
He was. I wouldn't call him the groundsman of the pitch. There was not a lot of work put into preparing the pitch, just doctoring it.
No, mate, come on. Serious.
Yeah. On this particular occasion that I think you're referring to, Greg said, okay, you can have a bat. The back porch we had a big cupboard there with all the pads and bats and whatever in it. So I've gone in there to pad up, to come out to bat. And I got out there and it looked like a bit of a wet patch on a good length on the wicket. And I said to him, you've watered the wicket? And he said, no, I haven't, no. Oh, okay. So I batted for a while, and the ball's seaming around. I said, you have watered the wicket, haven't you, so-and-so? And he said, well, only a little bit. It's only a small patch. I won't hit it all that often. But he did hit it pretty regularly. And in the end, I had had enough of that and stormed off. But being in Adelaide, every house had a tank in the backyard to get some water you could actually drink. And on the tank stand was the tomahawk that Dad had been doing some gardening with. And our backyard was quite a big, I suppose it was a quarter-acre block. So the wicket went across the yard, and it was about 20 yards probably from where we bowled to where we batted. If you wanted to have a decent run-up, you had to run along the fence, then do a quick left-hand turn and bowl. But behind that, there was a whole lot of fruit trees and almond trees. So I've grabbed the tomahawk, and Greg's ducked and dived amongst the different trees, and then he figured, I better make a dash for this because he's not given up. So he shot off down the side and high jumped. It was your personal best at that stage.
I think so, yeah.
In the high jump, I think, was it? Over the side gate, and I just sunk the tomahawk into the gate, and Greg came back a few hours later when he thought it had settled down a bit.
But there's a deeper point here, because cricket it's potentially a very tough game. It's a hard ball. There are certain things, and there's a question for talented young kids: at what level do you make them play? Because you guys were playing B grade cricket when you were at school, and that's tough, hard cricket for 14, 15-year-old kids. But it probably gives you the toughness to then go on and play for state and country. At the same time, there's a lot of parents who wouldn't want their kids who've got a bit of talent at age 14, 15, facing grown men tearing it. How do we get that balance right to bring on a generation of really tough, good-to-go cricketers, while at the same time not scaring away potential players?
Well, I think two things about that, and I think it shows up in our family. I didn't realise, I'd forgotten that Greg went to Plimpton High for a year and a bit and then went to Prince Alfred College. But I played B grade at 14. Greg, I think, 15?
No, I was 14.
14 as well, right. So we're playing second grade cricket, so we're playing against men. So that was bloody tough. But by the time Trev came along, they'd booted the three, because there were three. There was Prince Alfred College, St Peter's College, Adelaide High, all in second grade, and they'd punted them back to school cricket. So Trev made the most runs of the three of us by a mile. And unfortunately for Trev, everybody said he'll be the best, because they only looked at the number of runs he got, not who we got him against. And that was important. Another thing that was important, and I didn't think of this until way after I'd retired, and I said to Jean, our mother, were you shitting yourself with, you got three boys all playing against really fast bowling, none of us with a helmet on, were you shitting yourself that we could have got hurt? And Jean said, no, I wasn't. And Jean wasn't a bullshitter. And so
Clearly neither are you, Ian. No?
Well, I think I learned a bit from Jean. I bloody hope so. In part, I learned how to swear from Jean.
She did a good job.
She did a very good job, yeah. So I'm told. Martin, our father, just to digress for a second, somebody said to Martin when I was about 10 or 11, are you worried about Ian swearing? And Martin said, the only thing that bothers me about Ian swearing is he didn't start till he was 9. But, and I think it's really important that you play against older blokes. I mean, what you got to do, what the system should be is you get a kid, you see him and you think he can play, you throw him in the deep end. And if he can swim, you throw him in the next pool that's a bit deeper. And you keep going until the kid either hits the ceiling and can't go any further, or he becomes an international cricketer. And if you've gone through all those steps and succeeded, then by the time you get to international level, you should be pretty decent. So now, you know, it's a totally different system to what we grew up in, and I'm not 100% sure how you replicate that, but to me, that is the best system.
But these days, you're also competing against so many other sports. I mean, it's quite amazing. The World Cup rugby, off to a flyer against Georgia, so we can pencil that in. We're looking very good. World Cup cricket's about to take off. We've just had our best ever results in men's and women's soccer football. We've just had women come equal first, second and third in the world high jump and pole jump track and field, pole vault track and field. The NRL finals are kicking off. The AFL finals are underway, a sport where the only country in the world that plays it and takes hundreds of world-class athletes away from other sports all the time. Bruce Adams from Adams Cricket Academy asks, do you feel that Cricket Australia invests sufficiently in grassroots cricket? How do we even, there's so many, if you're a talented boy or girl in sport at the moment, there are so many things that could be calling on you. How do we make sure we get the next generations of great cricketers through, who growing up 30 years ago, it's just the only sport you would have played over summer?
Yeah, it's a challenge. You know, I think cricket's done it pretty well, and obviously we're integrating women into elite cricket as well, which is great. It's challenging. I think the strength of Australian cricket has always been our club structure. You know, because there's a club just around the corner that you can go and play for if you're interested in playing. It's very hard to get the balance right. You know, I think generally we've got it pretty right, but you've got to identify those ones that have got a chance. If you want to have elite cricketers, you've got to identify the ones that have got a chance, and you've got to give them those challenges that they need when they need that challenge. You know, the worst thing you can do for a good athlete of any sort is to keep them at a level at which they're competent for too long, because then they adapt to that level. You've got to keep pushing the ones that have got a chance. It's really hard to get it exactly right, but I think generally we've done a pretty good job.
Yeah, Trevor, you're...
just one second, yeah. I think anyone thinking about playing cricket for Australia should look at the odds. And you'll find, I don't know, is it 6 or 7 noughts before you get to a number? It's something like that anyhow. You're talking now, okay, with 3 forms of the game. Test cricket, 50 over, T20. So let's talk 25 people could play for Australia. That's 25 out of 25 million. Your odds aren't great.
You're a great case in point here, Trevor, because played cricket at the highest level. You're a really good baseball player. And I've heard said by some actually VFL, SAFL, AFL as we now call it, football, was probably your best sport. Why cricket? Were all 3 pulling on you? Was there something that made you choose cricket?
Well, as far as the Aussie rules go, I mean, I only played that because you had to play for something for the school and they didn't play baseball. So that was the only real reason I played Aussie rules.
But you were a gun.
Oh, I don't know about that, but you know, I wasn't too bad, but I was. You know,
That's better.
Yeah. But cricket and baseball were way ahead of AFL, and certainly, at school it wasn't too bad. It wasn't all that physical, but I played a couple of seasons with the old scholars, and shit, you get belted there. In the 1970s, we're talking about rugby league and Aussie rules were bloody dangerous. You know, it was run around getting belted.
The fact that you were obviously a very good cricketer, the fact that you had two brothers who were also exceptionally good cricketers,
Yeah.
did that make you any more or less likely to choose that sport?
Well, Greg said Ian was his hero. I had two of them. I had two older brothers that were my heroes. I mean, initially I probably had Harvey and Linwell and Miller and these sort of guys, Benno. But then, when I was probably about 9 by the time Ian's playing baseball for South Australia, cricket for South Australia. A couple of years later, he's in he picked for Australia in baseball and then picked for Australia in cricket. And Greg's in the South Australian team. I don't know that I would have had a choice. There's a story that Ian might like to tell about one year when Dad was worried that I was going to give up cricket and play baseball. Because, the baseball had dropped off a bit because they changed it to summer sport in 1968 in Adelaide. I was about 15 or 16 when they did that. So that was sort of the end of baseball as a major sport for me and for Ian and Greg. But I got injured in a cricket game and hurt my shoulder, and I developed a bad throwing technique trying to protect my shoulder. So I thought, the shoulder was okay again, but I got this bad throwing technique. So I thought, I'll go and play baseball, because playing cricket, you're running after the ball and you think, Christ, this is going to hurt when I throw it back. So you try and protect it. Whereas in baseball, the ball's hit you just got to pick it up and throw it to first base. So I did that, and that got my shoulder better, or got the throwing technique back. And that's when I played summer baseball then. I played a season of winter baseball to get the shoulder right. And then they asked me, do you want to play summer baseball? They played on Sundays and Wednesdays and occasionally on Saturday. So I said, I'll play baseball on Sunday and Wednesday, but if it's Saturday, I'll play cricket. So that's what I did. And that's when Dad got worried that I was going to flick cricket. But I was never going to do that, because it would have been too hard trying to convince him.
And we're all the better for it that you stuck with it.
This is how much chance we had of playing baseball. I remember I used to get the Armed Forces radio, and so I'd listen to the baseball. And I must have been listening to a really good game one night. So I'm about 11, maybe 12. And I've listened to this game. It's a great game, and it's about midnight. So I've trusted my luck a bit, because I've gone into my parents' bedroom after midnight, and and I get there and I'm really excited about the baseball. I said, Martin, when I grow up, I'm going to America and I'm going to play baseball. And he said, piss off, son, and go back to bed. You're playing cricket.
There you go. And we are lucky that that's what happened, because let's fast forward to 1972 against England at the Oval. We're down 2-1 in the series. You two become the first brothers to both hit centuries in the same Test match innings. What an incredible achievement. What are your recollections? It is 50 years on, but what are your recollections of that history-making day? You've gone on from the backyard and the little watered 10-yard pitch, and you both knocked down a ton against the old enemy at the Oval.
Yeah, it was a great thrill, mainly because when we started batting together for South Australia, we had no real communication. And
really?
We had it was a real problem. We had a few run. Actually, Ian got run out a few times. But
because I responded to his bloody call.
I said that a good runner is the one that's always safe, and that was me mostly. But just before we get on to the Oval, I ran him out in a Test match at the Adelaide Oval on the last ball of the day. We were playing against the West Indies, and I happened to hit the ball to Viv Richards. It was to his right hand. Anyway,
hit it bloody hard.
But I didn't quite hit it where I expected to hit it. I was expecting to hit it in the middle of the gap, and I was sort of just a bit off. And so I called on what I expected the shot to be, and Ian was only just run out. If he hadn't been sitting on his arse, he probably wouldn't have been run out. But he's got run out, and there was a bit of steam coming out his ears as he sort of ran to the river end and did a bit of a wheel around to head back to the Australian dressing room. And I thought I should walk fairly slowly to the dressing room and just give him as much time as possible to sort of calm down. It didn't work because when I got there, I got a full barrage, actually both barrels, but I tried to explain. I tried to apologise first of all, and then I apologised for trying to apologise because it was a waste of time. So we didn't have a great synergy when we were batting together at first because we'd spent all our early years as enemies, as opponents. So it took us a while. So we finally worked it out at the Oval, and we got it right on that day. And it was a tremendous pleasure to be able to spend, because that was probably the longest we batted together at any stage up to that point. So to be able to have that much time batting together and being successful, was a real thrill. And Mum and Dad, and I think you were there to see the game.
It's a rarity. There's only 4 occasions in Test cricket that brothers have scored centuries in the same Test innings. Ian and Greg, the Oval 72. The Marshes, Mitch and Sean did it. The War brothers did it. But you guys do it again in New Zealand in 1974. Where Ian scores 145 in the first innings with Greg 247 not out. Then in the second dig, they both get centuries. Ian 121 and Greg 133. The only time so far, and I'm pretty confident you can play Test cricket for as long as you want. This is the only time ever brothers are going to score centuries in both innings together of a Test match. Amazing. And we've got a photo here that I just want to bring up. I love this photo for so many reasons, right? One, the guy on the left, that is so Greg Chappell. The guy on the right, that is so Ian Chappell. And I love it, just you're there, you're poised, you're making history. Greg, very formal, very stylish, very elegant. Ian, where's the after party? Let's just get the job done here. But what an amazing achievement. That 1974, that is truly incredible, Ian.
I thank Richie Benno every day for letting me do that, bloody undo my shirt and the skin cancers I've had cut out. I think of Richie every time I have one cut out. The interesting thing about, I'll go back to 72 first. We played Northamptonshire in the game before the 5th Test at the Oval. And normally, if I'm going all right, get 40, get out, you're seeing the ball all right, don't waste things on, minor county games, you save them up for the Test. So we played against Northamptonshire, it was a shit wicket, it was wet, and Jimmy Watts, their captain, was bowling, and I thought, I'm not going to put my head down and try and make runs against this, but I had a big whoosh, got clean bowled, and this is how casual I was about it, because normally half an hour I'm not a sane person after I get out. This day I get out, I go in, take my pads off, throw the bat down, and I get 6 or 7 miniature bats that I've had signed for Martin. And I take them down to Martin in the crowd, who's sitting next to Gene. And I said, here's your bats, Martin. And Martin said, nice bloody shot, son. And if you'll excuse my French, I said, you can go and get fucked, Martin. And took off. Anyhow, that's the game before the Oval Test. We then bat in the Oval Test, and just as an aside, Ted Dexter bet on the pair of us to make 100 in that game. He won 1,200 quid. And I said to him when I saw him in the Caribbean, you still haven't bought me a beer yet, Ted. Anyhow, so we bat together, we make the 100. Greg goes, before I did, Greg goes to the tent, the Australian Trade Commission tent. I have a beer or two in the dressing room, then I wander over to the tent. And Jean has had a few gin and tonics to celebrate the fact that her 2 sons have got 100, you see. And I walk in and Jean comes charging over and gives me a hug and says, well done, dear, that was terrific, you see. And she says, you were right in Northamptonshire. And I hear from behind me, don't you bloody stick up for him. It's Martin. So now Gene's, I can piss off and go to the bar because Gene's got to handle Martin, who's not happy about being told where to jump off.
Let's jump forward. There were so many highlights in your careers we could dwell on, but let's jump forward for a moment to the Northern Summer just gone. World Test Championship. The Ashes were off to a flyer. Then we pull up a bit in the second half of that series, but it's an amazing Northern Hemisphere summer of cricket. Skander Malcolm from OFX, one of our platinum sponsors, asks, Greg, were you surprised at the reaction the Australians got from the MCC members and the media to that Johnny Bairstow stumping?
No, not surprised at all, to be quite honest. Look, there are a lot of people that go to the cricket who love the game, but they know very little about it. And a lot of them are in the members' stand at the at Lord's.
At Lord's.
And so they don't really know what's going on. I mean, anyone who understood cricket would have been watching that, and I'm led to believe that Joe Root's father was sitting in the stand, and
yes.
as it happened, he said, "That's out."
Yeah.
And I think most people that understood the game know that that's out. I've never understood why that and running the batsman out at the bowler's end is a bowler's or a wicketkeeper's problem. It's a batsman's problem. If the batsman didn't walk out of his crease when the ball was alive, then it wouldn't be a problem. And that's, I never understood it. And I think anyone who understands the game knows that, and even Johnny Bairstow, I think he knows that he stuffed up and tried to cover it. The media, well, you don't listen to the media anyway, but the English media particularly, their main job is to try and annoy the Australians, and they do a pretty good job of it most of the time.
Given that Johnny Bairstow had attempted that same dismissal twice in that test match, and that the English coach is responsible in his time as a wicketkeeper for some of the most dubious, borderline, unethical stumpings and run-outs. The current English coach, Mr. Bazball, ran out Murali once when Murali was walking down the wicket to celebrate another guy scoring 100.
Hang on, that's a load of shit. What the fielding side did was absolutely correct. If Murali had half a brain, he would have waited till the ball was dead and then gone down that end to congratulate the batsman.
But if you're going to do that, if you're comfortable doing that, and you should be, you really can't complain about what happened to Johnny Bairstow.
Did he complain?
The English coach, he wasn't going to have a beer with our guys.
Oh, well, don't worry about that crap. But and I mean, okay, you mentioned Bazball. That is the greatest load of shit that I've ever heard in my life. Because what Stokes is doing is exactly what England should have been doing for a long time. He's trying to win the test from ball number one. And that's how you should play the game of cricket. It's got bugger all to do with Bazball. It's proper cricket. And I think Stokes is a very good captain. And not just what they do with their batting. He's trying to get wickets. I mean, another great load of crap is when I hear somebody say, oh, he's bowling, it's a holding end. Why aren't you trying to get wickets at both ends? Don't give me that bullshit about, bloody Kumble's attacking and what's his name, Murali Kartik is playing a holding game. It's bullshit. You're trying to get blokes out at both ends. So anyone who says Bazball is talking through his hat.
Trevor, when it came to it, the fallout was gigantic for what was a completely acceptable dismissal, and it was all this stuff. And then it went back, and then it became Sandpaper Gate, and then people started bringing up An Afternoon back in 1981, and it's this long. And when a modern flashpoint happens, and everyone goes back to the underarm ball, is there part of you that just goes, oh, just let it go, it happened, it's over? What do you feel like when that gets, invariably recycled in moments of crisis?
Yeah, well, I've got used to it after 42 years or whatever it is. I wish it would go away, but it's not showing any signs of it yet.
I tried to talk you out of it, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, I wish I'd listened.
We won't dwell on it, but let's go. Give me 60 seconds. You try to talk him out of it?
No, that's crap.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that I did, but I didn't. But I do remember walking. I was feeling it long on at the time, I think, and I looked up and saw Brian McKechnie walking out the bat. I'd never seen him play before. He'd come over as a replacement. I should have worked out that batting number 11 for New Zealand, he probably wasn't that good, but he's a big, strong bloke, and I just thought, I've had a gutful of this, and I walked up to Trevor and said, how are you bowling your underarms? And he's looked at me and he said, I don't know. And I said, well, you're just about to find out. And I walked up to the umpire at the bowler's end, who was...
Don Weezer.
Yeah, Donnie. And I guess I had to inform him to let the batsman know, and his eyes rolled back in his head. He walked across to the square leg umpire and informed him what was happening, and I'm reliably informed that his eyes rolled back in his head. And McKechnie's eyes definitely rolled back in his head. But I got to say, it's not easy to bowl underarm.
Dead right.
And he's bowled an absolute jaffa. It was the most amazing delivery. It was always veering in towards the stumps. If he'd bowled a wide, I'd have been right in the shit. Because at that stage, they needed 6 to tie the game. They couldn't even win the bloody game. Anyway, he bowled a cracker. I played in a charity game a year or so later, and Richard Hadley was playing in the game, was in New Zealand. And Richard came in and tried to bowl an underarm delivery to me first ball and bowled a wide. So it just shows how bloody good an effort it was, with no practice, just to roll up there and get it right on line. I was very proud of him.
And so, I don't know, what's it? A month later, Trev's playing in a double wicket contest in New Zealand. And some clown with a really good sense of humour pairs Brian McKechnie with Trevor in the double wicket competition, you see. So they go over there, come home, I ring him up, I said, how'd the double wicket competition go? He said, we did all right. We got in the semi-final, we lost in the semi-final. I said, that's a good effort. I said, how'd you go with McKechnie? He said, well, not only didn't he hit a 6 in all the games we played, he didn't even hit a bloody 4.
Trevor, if I can go to another...
So, can I just add something to that?
Yeah.
Then when I got back home, I rang Greg and told him that story, and he said, I don't care.
One other moment in your career I want to bring up, Trevor, because if you ask the trivia question, who's the only Chappell brother to ever score a century in the One-Day World Cup? And that is you against India in 1983, opening the batting, smashing 100 against a pretty handy Indian team who go on to win the whole thing. That in itself must have been a pretty special moment on the subcontinent to bring up 100 in a one-dayer at the kickoff of the World Cup.
It was in England, not in the subcontinent.
My apologies, it was, yeah.
Well, probably that's the highlight of my international cricket. I mean, obviously playing Test cricket is a big highlight, and being fortunate enough to play on it in an Ashes tour, I squeezed that into my 3 Test matches. So that was fortunate, but yeah, that was obviously the highlight in terms of scoring. And somehow the Indians did go on and win the 1983 World Cup.
How do we see Australia placed in this upcoming One-Day World Cup? We're hearing the theory that we're going to go lots of all-rounders, and we feel we've just got to really smash the scoring along. Some people are saying, despite his impeccable form at the moment, Marnus Labuschagne probably can't force his way into the team because you can only have one steadying batsman, and that's probably Steve Smith, with a lot of other all-rounders and real clubbers of the ball. Have we got the balance right there? People are saying with a World Cup in India, you just need to pour on the runs game after game to win. Do we have the balance right with that philosophy? The thought of Marnus Labuschagne in the form he's in at the moment not playing in an Australian team at a World Cup might strike some people as curious. Yeah,
look, I haven't followed that closely in the last little while, but I think Australia is good enough to win the World Cup. How they go about playing it will be up to them. But I mean, India, I think, have got to start favourite in the subcontinent. The subcontinental teams will, be suited by the conditions. But I think India, England, Australia are probably, the three best sides going around if they play well enough. But, Pakistan has talent. They're not overly reliable. New Zealand are very good performers at the highest level. But I think those three teams would be my favourites.
Many years ago, someone said to me, there's no place in the modern game for Doug Walters, who happens to be sitting down here with us. And I said, well, if there's no place in the modern game for Doug Walters, then there's something wrong with the modern game, because that man was a match winner. And I was the beneficiary of it on a number of occasions. But here's a guy who scored 100 in a test session 3 times in a session, and he did it a 4th time in an international. Everyone forgets that in the game that Sobers got 254 in Melbourne, Doug got 100 in a session against the international 11. So here's a guy who can score 100 in a session, and some idiot is telling me there's no place in the modern game for him. The guy obviously happened to forget something else, that he was a pretty decent bowler as well. Although he used to occasionally bowl those shit outswingers way outside off stump so you couldn't reach him. But he was a terrific all-round cricketer, great fielder. So why is there no place? So team selection and balance of teams really is a very subjective thing, and what's important is if the side that you pick wins the competition, then you've picked the right side.
And if you do have a moment later and you want to hear a great story about old school cricket, talk to Dougie Walters about the time he was playing a test match and didn't realise there was not a rest day the next day. And I believe Doug was pointed out it was not a rest day at about 3 a.m. in a sponsor's tent.
That was his bullshit excuse for turning up 20 minutes late for a bloody test match. And when I said to him, mate, I made him field at fine leg at that end and fine leg at that end. And after 40 minutes, we have drinks. So we're standing around at drinks, and I know he's over here, and I'm avoiding his gaze, you see, and he's coming around gradually. Suddenly he's next to me, and he said, hey, will I have to get a bike? And I said, Doug, we're playing cricket. It's not cycling. Why would you need a bike? He said, well, if I'm going to keep going from fine leg to fine leg, I'm going to need a bike pretty soon. And I said, no, Doug, you won't need a bike. You'll be fielding in normal positions, and I hope in future you don't turn up late. And he looked at me and he said, I'd love to promise you that I'm never going to turn up late again, but I don't want to lie to you.
Doug Walters, ladies and gentlemen, one of the greats. Time is slipping away from us. We're close to wrapping up. Greg Bora from CDC Data Centres asks, how should Australian cricket respond to the growing competition for players between various T20 leagues, national team duties and the like? Greg, you did some work at the Rajasthan Royals for a while, didn't you? How big a hold does T20 have on the modern game? Is it starting to impinge on getting the best possible balance with Test cricket and the like?
Yeah, it's having its effect. 20 over cricket is fabulous for the game. I mean, it's attracted a new audience to the game and the young audience to the game. There's no doubt that it's done some good. But somehow I think we need to try and get some control if we can, but I think that may be a forlorn hope. The new 2020 league in the USA is a real worry. I mean, that's really controlled by BCCI in India. I think for most countries, Test cricket's too hard. Producing players, producing a competitive Test team is really difficult. Australia, England, India have the resources, or certainly have had the resources to be able to spend. And I know how much money we spend on developing players over the years that I was working at Cricket Australia. Not many countries can afford to do that, and I think that's taken its toll on Test cricket. England and Australia will play Test cricket for a long time, I think, but for some of the countries to be competitive at that level, it is difficult. The shorter the game, the easier it is to be competitive for longer. I think we're going to get to the time when there will be players who are just playing for the franchises around the world, and international cricket will be lost to them. It'll be a little bit like football, soccer, where you're playing for your franchise and occasionally you play for your country. For a lot of blokes, I just hope for Australia and England that we'll keep playing Test cricket for quite a bit longer. And I think the series just finished did a lot for Test cricket. The people, and there were a number of people in the room that were over there for a lot of the summer, and we watched a lot of Test cricket. We talked a lot of Test cricket. That was a really, really positive thing, and I think that players playing for a result from the start, playing exciting cricket, will keep Test cricket alive for a bit longer, but maybe not for all countries.
So in closing, I might finish with you, Ian. What is it about this most beautiful but peculiar game that is Test cricket? Some people here, like the former Prime Minister was the first one to coin in the public vernacular the cricket tragic, and there's many, many of us in the room. I got married at the beginning of last year to a wonderful woman whose relationship with Test cricket is just beginning to evolve, let's say. Not really something she'd paid much attention to up until... When you come from the outside, it's a weird, peculiar beast. What is it? What is it that is so magical about Test cricket?
Well, cricket tragic is a load of crap. I mean, I don't like the term at all. I think it's a load of bullshit. That's the first thing. Test cricket, I don't know. I mean, when I was playing and growing up, it was the game. So you'd probably have to speak to a Pat Cummins or a modern cricketer to find out what the attraction is to them. But I mean, the attraction to me and probably to Greg and to Trevor was the game. And if you wanted to represent Australia, that's what you had to do. You had to reach Test level because there was no 50-over cricket, certainly no T20 cricket. So that was the only way.
But a game that can go for days, and especially when you're batting, it is 11 versus 2. In moment by moment, for day after there is something about that tests someone's resilience and mental skills as much as their skill at hitting a ball.
Well, it's very well named. I think that's an important thing. It is a test. It's a test of your, obviously your resilience, your ability to go for 5 days. It's a test of your courage. And it's a test of your brain power. So it is a really good test. You were talking about the T20 game just a moment ago. That is the biggest and best test of your ability, your resilience, your guts, your intelligence. The 50-over game, I think, is a very good game of cricket and is not quite the test. And it's interesting that it's the bowlers who are limited, not the batsmen, which probably tells you who the people are making the laws and the bylaws. And T20 cricket is not a test of probably any of those things. So that, to me, was the attraction, that was the game, where you could make your name if you could play for Australia. So that was the attraction in my time. What's the attraction now? You'd have to ask Pat Cummins or someone like that.
But it is a test of skill and resilience and character that the three of you absolutely excelled at. Thank you so much for being our guests this evening. Please, a round of applause for Trevor, Greg and Ian Chappell. That brings us pretty much to the end of our formality. So I'm just going to read out the names of the people who've been successful in the silent auction. Please don't race away. If you have been successful in the silent auction, please sort out your accounts with us. The silent auction, item number 1, the Geelong Premier's jersey. Congratulations, Paul McRedmond, table 30. The Chappells dual bat, table 22. Again, our friends at table 22, Steve Trevor. The 4 Fox guests at the Sydney Test, Angela and Jamie Swales, table 41. The Rex Airline Business Class return, Deidre Parker Finch, table 11. Pat Cummins' World Cup shirt, table 9, Anthony Starsick. Hill of Grace 2016 Shiraz, the Test Captain's Choice. Chris West, table 29. Dan Fitzgerald, table 17's won the Aussie 50-plus Test average bat. Anthony Starsick again, congratulations Anthony. You're going to be taking your Pat Cummins World Cup shirt away for the weekend at a Melbourne BMW, thanks to Melbourne Weekend Idol. John McMurtry, the Jimmy Barnes Monster Package, table 5. Chris West again, thank you Chris, Australia Day Harbour Yacht Cruise. Elise Perry signed bat, Felicity Sue. Vera Coley's Night of Frenzy gloves, $5,750. Harvey Clur, table 23. Bowled over, Elias Pavlopoulos, table 24. Harvey Clur back with the mini bat, Maximum Greatness, table 23. John Ficaro, table 23, iconic North Bondi RSL for 5 years. And James Percival, table 39, the Farewell Buddy, Sydney Swans 2023 jumper. Ladies and gentlemen, to close the night, Greg Chappell.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Adam, for stepping in as our 12th man. Thank you very much. It's been wonderful. You've been tremendous for us. We love having you. We look forward to doing it again sometime soon. And Jimmy Smith, where are you? Jimmy. He might have scarfed, does he?
Oh, yes. Come on up, Dan.
Take that.
One final word from the chair of the foundation as we send you on your way, ladies and gentlemen. Darshek, what have you got for us?
500,000 raised today, 5 million over. Ladies and gentlemen, Okay, I'm not asking you for any more money. No more money. We have raised a record amount this evening. $500,000. We've never done that. So thank you very much. Really, it's amazing. And we have exceeded $5 million in the short time that we have been in existence. And the third and most important thing I wanted to tell you is that before the end of this year, our 7 charity partners will be getting $1 million from us.
$1 million this calendar year. Congratulations, Darshek, to everyone at the Chappell Foundation. Thank you so much for your support this evening. We'll see you next year.